There are times when the Hebrew writer is quite poetic in his wording and in his ideas. And I didn't talk about this last time, but this verse 13 is one of those places, in my opinion, where he writes, make, and this is a quotation from the book of Proverbs, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Where did that come from? Well, okay, we've been talking about, strengthen the arms and the knees, and symbolically, we talked about that in terms of growing to become spiritually and emotionally mature. Now, frankly, the Hebrew writer, emotional maturity was of zero concern to him. Probably never entered their conversation, maybe not even their vocabulary. He was most interested in one's spiritual development and spiritual maturity, strengthening the arms and strengthening the knees to grow stronger in your spiritual moorings and anchors. Okay. But, all right, makes level paths for your feet. I do a good bit of walking, and I used to have this pair of shoes that I loved to wear, but they were very loose on my feet. And once when Debbie and I were out here walking we got this little route that we take, and that shoe that wouldn't stay, tight on my foot caught on a bump in the sidewalk, and I did a face plant. It was not pretty. Well, make level paths for your feet. I get that in its most literal sense. The spiritual aspect of that has to do with let me just ask, how in the world do I make my spiritual path level? Partly I don't. There are things that I don't have any control over, and often, the levelness or not levelness of the path is beyond my control. So most of the time, it's about what do I do about it when the path is not level. But Solomon wrote this from the Proverbs. I think he was talking about do what you can to make your path straight. And one of the ways you can make your path straight is to pick a straight path, pick a level path. They're not always available, but when they are, you're way smarter to take them. And then our guy, the Hebrew writer, picks it up and says, so the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. That is hard for me to integrate into the whole rest of this, unless I bear in mind, this is very symbolic. Who would be the symbolically lame? That, in my opinion, that would be people who were unable to do the walk of life, the walk of following God. They're handicapped. They're hindered. I can tell you some things that, in my experience, in my own life, and working with people for 50 years, so I don't know everything, but I know a little bit. And one of the things I know is one of the things that hinders people in their walk are Christians who don't live out the Jesus life. There are Christians who walk with Jesus selectively, or even, this has happened, deceitfully. Disappointment is an enemy of spiritual forward movement for lots and lots and lots of people. Now, maturity does an important thing in a believer's life. Maturity in Christ and emotional maturity, I don't think if you can, you shouldn't separate those two things. They need to be hooked together. But what maturity does is makes it possible for us to rebound after disappointment. So one of the big things that I see is people being disappointed by other people who claim to be Christians. A second piece has to do with, again, now back to disappointment, with the way things happen. I have known many people actually who, because of the disappointments in their life, and sometimes it's disappointment with people, but sometimes it's just the disappointment with the way this turned out. I thought I could trust God to make this work out for me, and it didn't work out for me. Disappointment in those kinds of things can be a real hindrance to a person's walk with Jesus. And one of the aspects of that is when we have a limited perception, a limited perspective, there's no way we can figure out and work out why this didn't work out. We need a much broader view. I believe there are things in my life that I can't explain, that have been incredibly disappointing. And if God were to explain them to me, either my head would just explode, or I wouldn't be able to get it even with that, because I don't have his eternal perspective. So perspective can do that. And I think this is going to sound like a real criticism, but an observation is sometimes people become spiritually lame out of laziness. Ouch. I'm not talking about how you get your gold stars from God. That's not what this is about. But when a follower of Jesus becomes lazy, that's not about God's grace. That's about my laziness. Because one of the things that God's grace does, we talked about it last time, is it makes it possible for me to make every effort. And if I just decide I'm done, whatever, and I get lazy, you know what that does over time? It atrophies my spiritual muscles. And there are many more reasons why people become spiritually lame, but God's desire for us is that instead of the lame being disabled, they would be healed. So instead of me coming along to a person who has become spiritually lame and spiritually disabled, and me criticizing and kicking and castigating them, and what heals. And we may not be able to come down with just the singular, absolute answer to this, but it's worth taking the time and effort to think through. What heals this spiritual lameness and disablement? The only thing I know of is God's grace. If a person has become lazy, and by virtue of their atrophied muscle, spiritual muscle, they become lame, I might have to say something strong to them, but that's not going to heal them. Remember, the difference between punishment and discipline is that punishment is only to get the person's attention. Discipline is to teach them away from a destructive habit and toward a productive habit. So it's grace. When someone has been deeply wounded spiritually, only grace can heal that wound. When they've been so deeply disappointed, only grace can draw them back toward a trust that was maybe broken, but at least damaged. So it's grace, in my opinion. But see, here's the thing. Grace, in my experience, is the cure for most everything. All right. The Hebrew writer kind of leaves us with that and kind of moves on to another idea. In verse 14, he uses the phrase again, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Well, I stopped last time at and be holy. Remember, you and I we don't get to control whether or not that other person is going to be at peace with us. But we do have to make effort toward that. And then it's not just peace with everyone and to be holy. What is holy? I've talked about this before. It's one of the Greek words that I remember. The Greek word is hagios. Holy means a fairly simple thing. It means set apart, not like other stuff. I'm in the book of Numbers in my morning reading, and there is a whole lot there about the tabernacle and the furnishings of the tabernacle. For instance, let me give you this. The altar of burnt offerings was considered holy, and anything that had been on it became holy because it had been on that. The furniture of the holy place and the most holy place was all holy. It didn't have a secondary use. It was only for the use in that tabernacle. God is holy. He is completely other than us. Yes, we're made in his image, but we're not him. And the New Age blows by many, many facts to come up with what they say. You are not a God. We already have a God, and you and I don't qualify. Holy means separate. In our lives, one of the aspects that should mark a Christian is that we are holy. Does it mean we're perfect? No. But it does mean we are different than. There are times when we're going to have the same taste, we're going to enjoy some of the same things and all that, but on a core level, our values are different. Our judgment comes from our values that are not like the world around us. Make every effort, the Hebrew writer writes, to be holy. I piddled around with that first thing for so long. I'm going to also have to come back again next time to this holy deal. So, till then, thanks for watching. Soul Care with Stevie Boy.